Thanks for showing up. This is going to be fun tonight. So let me get this out of the way. I've got some pretty big news, and part of me wants to do it now because a lot of you are more the music side of things, music fans. I don't know if I want to bore all you guys with all the tech stuff first, but on the other hand, anticipation is good. It builds character. And it's what I want to do is going to lead into a little announcement that I have to make later. So I think what I'm going to do that. Let me dive into some of the studio stuff. I won't take too long. I want to keep an eye on incoming questions because I'd like to do more of that tonight than just talk your ear off. And then I will lead into this project announcement. So that said, let me jump right in. A lot of you have asked, let's see, where's my mouse? A lot of you have asked about my my writing template in Logic. Logic is the digital audio workstation software that I use. I've used it for a long time. Let me switch cameras here so you can see Logic. There's Logic. So this is the software that I use to do everything. I've used it for 27 years now. It was originally on the Atari platform. Can you believe that? Back when Atari made computers in the late 80s, early 90s. And back then it was called Notator. It's a German, it came from a German company. And right around 1993, I was working at a music store in New Jersey when I still lived in Pennsylvania, and got a product brochure for this software. And on paper, it looked like so geared for the way I think and the way I like to do things. It was the only software at the time that let you come up with custom key commands and really make it your own. So that's kind of why I started with Logic. And there's a handful of competitors out there. There's Digital Performer, Cubase, of course, Pro Tools. Oh gosh, my mind's going blank. There's a handful of others, but those are the big ones. And they're all great. They all do essentially the same thing. It's just a matter of what you prefer and what what your workflow is. For me, several people have asked, though, since I've got this room full of keyboards all around me, and there's some pictures on my website if you want to check them out, and of course there's a million of them on my Facebook page. People have asked, what's your workflow? How do you get all these keyboards talking to Logic? And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk you through that. So right now, because of this new project I'm working on that I'll talk about later, I've got a mix of both software instruments, like the sound I've got called up right now, which is the Blair Masters signature grand that you can see up. Let's see if I can point. I'm having to do the mirror thing. Up there, you see the icon in my track list. That's the Blair Masters signature grand that's in Backstage Pass, and developed by my good friend Blair Masters. Oddly enough, Blair sampled his Yamaha C7 Grand a long time ago, the first time, and he's done it several times since, and we decided to kind of really up the ante with it, and so I took Blair's original recordings and added some features, and so together we worked on this, and that's the this is the main piano I use typically when I'm writing. So so that's a software instrument that's all coming from the computer. But I also have all my keyboards physically connected. What you see behind me, all the physical keyboards back there, they all get addressed by Logic. I guess that's the way to say it. So for example, let me go over to Logic here and pull one up. This one that I'm selecting now, oh, let's see, let me switch cameras again. This guy, it's kind of hard to see. You can't really see it. It is an emulation of an old Mini Moog, Model D, by Behringer, and it excels at these analog basses. Now, you're not going to see what I'm doing here, but... so that is that's an example of Logic It's connected by MIDI. Those of you guys, the technical guys, know what that is. It's just a form of communication that goes down a special cable from the computer into an interface. And that interface connects to all the keyboards, and they all talk to each other. And so when I play on my main keyboard here, that is sending out what I play to that particular piece of gear, and then the audio from that piece of gear gets routed into my console, which, again, you can't see that at the moment, but if you look at my studio walkthrough video on YouTube, it shows how that works. So all of the keyboards in the room are all routed into the console. That console gets routed back into Logic, and so Logic is kind of the home base for everything. So I'm just going to step through some things and let you hear a couple different things. You already heard the piano. Let's see, I'll come back to that. This patch is also a virtual instrument. It's a sample library called Albion from Spitfire in London, and this is one of the main string patches I use when I'm just kind of writing and putting orchestral ideas down. So and I've got custom controllers here, so I can actually switch articulations. So the main one that you heard, that's my sustained strings, but if I want quick, like staccato, that kind of stuff, I can hit a button and change to that. Okay, so that's that. I'll come back to why I have the string thing there. You already heard the Behringer, I call it the Boog, Behringer Moog. Killer synth for basses and that kind of stuff. This one is back there. It's that top keyboard that I'm pointing to right now, the Roland D50, which came out in 1987. It's one of the iconic keyboards from the 80s. It was responsible for a ton of keyboard sounds on lots of hit records. And it actually, right now, is making a big analog synth patch, which you wouldn't think of the D50 doing that, but it actually does a good job with that stuff. So big gnarly analog synth stuff. And guys, I'm going to come back to your questions here, just so you know. I'm just going to do this first, and then I'll jump over to that. Moving on. Below that, the Yamaha DX7, the other synth of the 80s. This keyboard was on, I've talked about this in other videos. You've heard this sound. Sorry, not this sound. This is just a simple brass patch. Sounds incredibly cheesy right now, doesn't it? But this is just the naked, unprocessed DX7. You Michael W. fans will recognize, or you'll remember if you're a fan all the way back from 1983, his first record, his song "I Am Up." It's that sound from a DX7. Sounds crazy. So the reason I put that in is because those of you who are Backstage Pass users, you know by now I'm working on a big expansion pack called, I don't know what it's called yet. It's probably going to be called DX Dreams. And it takes the DX7, and I sampled my TX816, which is 8 DX7s in a rack. So it goes from this, and when you layer 8 of them, you get that big, massive wall of sound. I mean, that's so iconic, you know, big 80s. That sound will be in the expansion, by the way, so. You'll hear that a lot on Toto records, like Pamela. That's that. Next up, you've heard this one before. I played a little bit of it. The Roland Jupiter X, emulating a Juno 106 in this case, or excuse me, a JX8P. Simple analog pad. And the reason I have several Jupiter icons here is because there are 5 MIDI channels. So essentially 5 different parts all come from that one keyboard. So let me close that up. That's the Jupiter X. I'm going to skip a couple of these. The Mini Log by Korg. This is one of my favorite current new synths. It's think it's Chariots of Fire. Of course, a lot faster, but let me actually pull up a couple different sounds on this thing. When I'm looking for a legitimate analog kind of sound. Kind of some Keith Emerson stuff there. So you get the idea. That's the mini log. It just does those old analog sounds from the 70s and 80s really, really well. Yamaha Montage back there all the way. I can't think of what I'm doing. On the bottom. There we go. That guy. Similar sounds. Of course, the Montage does all kinds of things, but it kind of is a good blend of analog and digital and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to do too much of this because I've done this before, but again, just to give you some more flavors. That's the Prophet Rev 2, which is essentially like a modern Prophet 5. Which is responsible for a ton of great sounds in the late 70s, early 80s. I'll just step through a couple of those. Blade Runner brass. It's just massive, sounds huge. Anyway, more of that kind of stuff. So lately, you can tell, if it's not obvious, I've been really into analog stuff again. I'm just, and this is kind of leading into what I'm going to announce later. But another Roland, the System 8. Let's see. This one has also got several different parts to it. Similar to the Jupiter, it's got a lot of that analog, but also digital stuff. I've talked about this guy before, the Access Virus. This thing, I've got 16 channels of the Virus, so it's essentially 16 of them in one box, which is one reason I love this thing. Again, just bigger than life. So you can see where this one would be really good for creative stuff, even film scoring. Also great at big analog basses. Man, if you don't have a subwoofer, you're missing out. I'm a sucker for arpeggiated stuff like that too, that's got a lot of motion. I get a lot of ideas from stuff like that. And pads, it's great at pad sounds. Some of those actually are in the first version of Backstage Pass. Anyway, tons of variety in the Virus. It's amazing what that thing can do. Also another new favorite, the Wave State. I've talked about this one before. I mean, that's a soundtrack in itself. It's amazing what you can do with that. Okay, so those are all hardware synths that you've heard, with that one or two exception above. Now I'm going to show you some of my favorite software synths. These are purely just software. This first one, it's called Dune, and This is one of my favorite synths of all time, analog, digital, software, hardware, whatever. It just is huge. And I actually call this sound Don't You Forget About. You'll know this when you hear it. And if you don't know that song, you didn't live through the 80s. It's a song from Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me, one of my favorite 80s songs. So that's the Dune. It just does a lot of really cool stuff. I'll just give you a couple other sounds in there. Let's see. Oops. Oh, what am I doing? Let's see, it's the wrong. Sound effects, patches. Good heavens. Yeah, there you go. That thing is a monster. Another one of my absolute favorites is called Nexus, and this one just had a major update. Again, same kind of stuff, just big, epic pads and leads and basses and... It's also kind of, if you're into EDM, it just does all things EDM. It's a killer synth for that kind of stuff. One or two more. This one I just discovered the other day. It's a free synth. It's an emulation of the old Oberheim OBX. And it's pretty dead on. It's amazing what you can find. So check that one out. Another one, I'd put this in my top 3. It's called Spire. But it's got a plugin called Black Hole on it. But this guy, it's very much like the Virus. It's like a software version of the Virus, but it's got just its own unique thing. Okay, just a couple other things. I'm a huge fan. In the last year, I think it was, I discovered a huge band from the UK called Above and Beyond, and they do kind of ambient synth, soundtracky type stuff. Some of their stuff is kind of dance oriented, but there's a song, oh, of course I can't remember what it's called now, but it uses this sound. I discovered this when I was thumbing through these sounds, and that's a lot slower than their song. It's called Solarized, and it's a gorgeous piece of music. But this, what you're hearing, is actually from Arturia. It's the Analog Lab collection, which is ridiculous. And that emulation you're hearing is of an ARP 2600, which was a synth. It's the synthesizer that made the sound of R2-D2 in Star Wars, among a lot of other killer iconic sounds in pop and rock music from the 70s and 80s. So that's that. One other little feature I've found lately, and I can't remember where this came in some kind of bundle, software bundle, and I don't remember what it was. Was it Native Instruments Complete, maybe? I honestly don't know. But I've never heard anything like this. Some of it can be bizarre, but... the interface is kind of crazy. So, yeah, it's just a little different than anything else. It's got some cool ambient stuff, ethereal stuff, just very, very different. Okay. I'm going to move towards one other thing here, and then I'm going to look at your questions. If it's not obvious already, I'm a huge fan of the 80s. That's my childhood, and I've been on this mission to find all these iconic 80s sounds. And part of the sound of the 80s is the drum stuff, because it was the era of drum machines, and one of the big iconic things from that era is the Simmons drum set. It's, if you can see the icon, I'm trying to do this. That one, the track that I'm on, these hexagonal plastic drum, fake electronic drums. Basically, it was all over the 80s. It's this sound. Phil Collins used it to death, Genesis, you name it, Prince. So, it's a plugin I found recently called VSDS-X. It's got by a guy named Ali James, and it is it's a port of the actual Simmons engine, it's an analog synthesizer that happens to make drum sounds, and it's really, really cool. That's the snare. So, for example, you can alter. I gotta zoom in here. So it's all of that glorious, goofy, cheesy stuff from the 80s, but layered into other things, this can be a remarkably big sound. So you're also hearing my banging on the keyboard layer with that. Sorry about that. So that's the Simmons plugin. Last one, it's something I've discovered recently, is called V-Prom. This is a Linndrum, and this was also all over the 80s. Those of you who were Prince fans, here, let me show you what I'm actually doing here. That sound, that's all over a lot of Prince records, and lots of other people use it as well. This one, this kit from the same plugin, that's the bass drum that Phil Collins used a lot, Susudio. So that's that. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show you really quick. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do that later. I've talked enough. I was going to show you a couple things. The reason I have this guitar is because I wanted to show you some reverb flavors. When I'm writing, if I want to emulate a guitar just to put an idea down, I'll use this. So, but I'm going to do that another time, because reverb alone could take up a whole episode. I want to show some different, why a particular plugin works great on one instrument but doesn't sound good on another, and why I have so many different reverbs and all that. But enough of that. Let me look at some of your questions, and then we'll get on to the music side of things. Oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch here that I've been missing. Let me find out where we left off. Stereo Phoenix, full-on album project. Let me answer that actually right now. Not an album per se, Tim. Just a series of singles. And that is one piece of news, actually. I just handed off the second single sketch to Vanessa so she could start putting her vocals on it. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But it's not going to be too long until that comes out. The first song that we did was by Stereo Phoenix. It was a cover of a song by Car Park North, which is one of my favorite bands. But I wanted to do that strictly because I love that song. And I also wanted to kind of tap into their audience. Car Park North is huge around the world, except for America. But the songs that we're going to do going forward are all massive hit songs. And so that there's a lot of advantages to that. It's going to have a built-in audience when they come out. So I can't wait for you to hear this one. It's a whole different direction than the first one. It's more of a ballad. But you're all going to know it. It's a massive song. So, and then there'll be more. We'll just do those as we can, because unfortunately, It doesn't pay the bills, you know. I mean, the whole idea behind Stereo Phoenix is we want to do these songs so that hopefully they can get placed in advertising and maybe film trailers or something like that. And then, of course, that would pay some bills. But there's no guarantees. So you kind of have to take one day at a time and do those things around other work. So, and maybe, you know, some point there'll be enough to release it as a record. But it just right now it's going to be a series of singles. Okay, let's see. Other questions. The granola cereal I eat every day is from Germany. Lots of good. The best stuff is from Germany. Cars. Best cars are German cars. I miss my German car. Unfortunately, it's no longer with me. I'm trying to see here what some of your questions are. Calvin, wow, you have got all the pictures of all your instruments in Logic. Yes, like I was saying earlier, one of the things I've always loved about Logic is how customizable it is. And even to the fact that you can fly in pictures of whatever. And it helps, you know, certainly for aesthetics. Like, for example, if I was recording Vanessa, let me show you. I'll go to my custom icons folder. And these are all icons that I've made over the years. Let's see, where's Vanessa? She's in here somewhere. There she is. So if I was tracking Vanessa, you know, I'd put up a custom icon. It just helps visually to see things really fast when you're working. So that is the deal with custom icons. Carolyn Shield asks, do you have one of the most varied assortment of keyboards of anyone you know? Probably. A good friend of mine, Michael Whitaker, he and I are probably the only two people I know in Nashville. I'm sure there's others, but he's the only one I know of that has a similar collection as I do. So all I know is I love what I've got, and I'm very, very grateful, and it's fun to have. Basically, I've set up my studio as the music store that I used to go into in the 80s when I was a kid, and I would spend every Saturday in there. My mom would drop me off, and I'd make a beeline for the back of this music store, and this is kind of what it looked like. It was all these keyboards up on racks like this, and I was mesmerized. And so that's kind of how I designed my studio, so that when I walk in here, I'm like, man, this is awesome. So yeah, my inner 15-year-old loves it. Let's see, what else? Jason Shepfer, what's going on? Again, my Canadian buddy. Can't wait to get some Tim Hortons with you at some point. I'm trying to find some questions here. 80s music is glorious. Ben Gibson. Buddy, you better preach on that a while. Yes, real music and vocalists. Dave Cleveland, what's happening? It's good to see you. Dave Cleveland is one of Nashville's A-list guitar players, massive talent, and a huge heart. We go to church together and see him from time to time, and it's good to see Dave. Good question, Calvin. How do you get those synth patch names from your hardware and view it in Logic? There's a couple ways to do that. If you're lucky, you can find published patch name lists on the internet, and then you can just copy and paste them. And then in Logic, there's a feature for that. You can just create a multi-instrument object in the environment, and then you just paste the names in there. And so that's what I've done. I haven't done it for all of them. Back in the glory days when I had all these synths, and then I sold everything in the 2000s and got rid of it all like an idiot. I used to. Some of them I actually typed all the names in for hundreds of patches, which is ridiculous. But nowadays, thankfully, you can pull most of that stuff off the internet. What else? While I'm scrolling, people have asked before, what sample rate do you work at? 44.1, 48K, or higher? That, excuse me, that can be a contentious thing. On one hand, people would say, you know, everything people listen to is on earbuds these days. They're not going to hear the difference. And that's true. But I think that, of course, you want to capture the very best resolution at the source. But to confess, I have been at 44.1 my entire career. Always have. I've done tests where I've done stuff at higher sample rates, And personally, I've just found that it's just, unless you're doing an acoustic project where it's all acoustic instruments or like an orchestral thing, then yeah, I can see doing things at 88.2 or 96K. There's certainly no downside to that, other than it just doubles the amount of horsepower you need from your computer. And when I'm writing, my film scoring template has over 1,000 tracks in it. And so I need all the horsepower I can get. So I've just always done everything at 44.1. Lately, I've switched to 48 just because any film projects, those are always at 48. And so the reason I always stayed at 44.1 is because that's what CDs ended up at. And I don't like converting sample rates if I don't have to. So anyway, all that to say, no, I don't do high sample rates. I just don't think it's worth it. For the kind of stuff I do. It just depends. So, but generally, no. I stay at 44.1 or 48. Ever mess with Keyscape from Spectrasonics? Absolutely. Anything Spectrasonics makes is world class, and it starts at the top. Eric Persing is also a big-hearted guy who is responsible for so much. The D50, that's all Eric's work. Back in the 80s, he was the voice lead on creating those sounds, and he's a great guy. He founded a great company, and their stuff is just fantastic. The funny thing about Keyscape is that I love it for all the non-piano sounds. The piano sound in it is fine. It's really good. The thing I love about it is you can get a ton of variation out of it. But I've got so many different piano options. I tend to go to Keyscape for other things like electric pianos and the quirky stuff, the stuff that they deep sampled, like the mallet keyboards and all that, little toy keyboards. Love that stuff. Let's see what else. Ben, moving back to Nashville. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. What do I think about Omnisphere? Again, back to Spectrasonics. I could talk about Omnisphere for quite a while, and I won't. It's interesting. You know, when it first came out, there was nothing like it. There's still nothing like it. You could spend a lifetime going through the sounds in Omnisphere and never use the same sound twice. It's just got so much stuff in it. And to me, that can kind of be a bit of a downside because I need to work fast. And so I tend to know what my options are. If I'm looking for a certain flavor, especially if it's like a straight up synth sound, you know, I can get that from stuff around the room. So what I would tend to use Omnisphere for is more the sound design stuff. If I was doing a scoring project, that's when I would look at Omnisphere, just personally. And it's, I mean, it's just an amazingly deep, deep synth. Let's see. So what else? Lauren Tucker, you got a DW8000. That's a unique piece of gear. And you know, funny thing too about some of these old vintage pieces, when you run them through modern processing, like you know, like modern pedals, like a Strymon for reverb, or my favorite for that is a Specular Tempest, you can get some incredible sounds out of those things. Brad, are there any tutorials on how to get Touch OSC Bridge to get the iPad interface? Yeah, there are links in the when you buy Backstage Pass, there's a section on that in the PDF manual that has links to how all that works. So check that out. It's in the PDF manual, and also in the Facebook group for Backstage Pass. My buddy Ewan did. He did some actual videos that walk you through that, so you can find those there. A couple more things. Let's see. Germany. You're in Germany. Oh, yes, I see what you're saying. What else? I'm looking for more questions. Carell, have you had time to check out the 10.5 update for Logic? That's what I'm running right now. I'm in the new 10.5. Some guys are saying they're having some issues with it, and I suspect that a lot of those are because they're on Catalina. I still will not go anywhere near Catalina. It's just nothing but a mess as far as I'm concerned. But knock on wood, I haven't had one bit of problem with it. In fact, let me switch cameras here. I don't know if you can see, it's blurry because of the camera I'm using, but my Stream Deck here, when I change profiles, I've got some new key commands there that that let me do some things in Logic in 10.5 that I've never been able to do before. And they're things that I've wished for 27 years, like dedicated key commands for different quantized values, which I've wanted that forever. So finally that stuff is in there. So for me, I love it. Yeah, Steve Barnes, Junkie XL Synth Collection. Yeah, him and BT are those two guys. I look up to them a lot. They're a lot of fun. I love both those guys. And my studio is probably, well, it's obviously a much smaller version of theirs. But yeah, but the concepts are the same. They're doing the same stuff. They just have more of it. And of course, they're also working on, you know, blockbuster films and all that kind of stuff. Let's see, what else? Wade Steele, have you considered using an iPad for live use of your samples? No, it's not powerful enough yet. It would be for doing basic stuff, but just because of the way I run Smitty's shows, I need the power of a full-on MacBook Pro, and also because I'm running click and stems and all that kind of stuff, I just want it all in one place. Plus, I use my iPad for controlling Backstage Pass. So it's not going to be long, probably in the next year or two maybe, we'll start seeing them becoming even more and more powerful. But nobody has, at least that I know of, has developed a platform yet for iPad that lets you really use it as a pro host for samples. Look at the time, see what we're doing. Okay, we're good. Can you talk specifically about what the O2R does for you? I'm starting to collect hardware synths and trying to decide the best way to route audio. Yes, great question. So again, you can see this in my studio tour video. It's on my YouTube channel. All of the keyboards, like I said earlier, they all get plugged into the O2R, which is my console. And the reason that I went with an O2R, it's actually the O2R 96, so it's the most recent version. A lot of the old stuff, and even the newer stuff, like the Matrix Brute back there, that guy, it's analog, and it's actually really noisy. And so I've got it set up so every channel has noise gates on it, so that when a keyboard's not playing at the moment, then it's essentially shut off, so you don't hear it. So it keeps things really clean. That's the main reason. I mean, the O2R is just really a big, dumb routing box. It just takes all of my audio from around the studio and puts it all down a ADAT light pipe into my Apollo, my Universal Apollo, which is my audio interface. And it just lets me route everything the way I want. I can create any combination, but really, I never even touch the O2R. I set it up once, and if I change anything out, I set up that channel. And so yeah, it's basically just a routing console just to take the audio and optimize all their gains. Everything is gain optimized, and I'm really just using it for the noise gates. And because it's digital, it works really well for that. What else? Jim Alfredson, good to see you, man. Jim Alfredson is a killer Hammond B3 player, and good guy. Good to see you. Let's see, what else? Mike O'Brien, do I use VE Pro? You know what? I meant to show that tonight, actually, and I forgot. Yes, I actually have it loaded up right now. And again, because I only have 2 cameras going, I don't have any focused on the PC. But I have 4 other computers in the studio. Most of the time, they're turned off. But when I'm doing a big scoring project, I have to turn them all on because one computer is not enough to do it all, unless you have a new $50,000 Mac Pro completely loaded. But that's not in the cards. So VE Pro, basically, it lets you use another computer, and it hosts all of your software, all of your virtual instruments, like your samplers, other synthesizers, and so on. So in my case, let me actually see if I can pull it up here really quick. Let me go to my library. Where'd it go? Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. That's why. Hang on. Here we go. Okay, so this is going to, it should. I'm actually asking a lot of my machines right now, so okay, it worked. All right, so let's see. Trying to get rid of the. There we go. Okay, so what it does is in Logic, it just is like a little connection utility. And so what I want to do is I want to connect to my PC. So I'm going to hit connect, and it's going to show anything that's loaded and on the network. So in my case, if I had all 4 computers connected and loaded, this thing that you just saw pop up, it would show, oh, you can't see it because I'm blocking it. Hang on, let me move it. So it's showing, gosh, I'm blind with this monitor. There it is. I'm running right now just one instance. Is it working? That's a bit. There we go. So now I'm connected. All right, there you go. So now you are hearing, I'm looking in the wrong place. Now, this is another version of that OBX synth, but it's actually running in my PC, which is behind me over here. It's a miraculous piece of software. And what really makes it amazing is, like when I did Ad Alta, I needed all these computers because it was a big orchestral project. And again, when I'm doing scoring, my template's over 1,000 tracks. So that PC alone has probably, I don't know, 500 or 600 different instruments loaded. And I can call them up right from Logic in my main computer, which is what you're seeing right now, and play them in real time with no additional latency. And the icing on the cake is I don't have to have separate audio or MIDI interfaces for each of those computers. It all talks via Ethernet cables. So when I hit a note here on my keyboard, it's sending out by Ethernet to my PC, generating sound, and that sound is coming back over that same Ethernet cable and talking to my main Mac. So that's VE Pro, and yeah, it is a game changer because my main Mac, for example, it's just a MacBook Pro with 32 gig of RAM. That's not near enough to do a big project. It covers most daily work, but for big scoring stuff, to be able to load a 1,000-track template on a MacBook Pro is nothing short of miraculous. And the only way I'm able to do that is because of VE Pro. So that's the deal there. Let's see. What else? Looking for other questions. Chris Perry, I was given a DX11 in the last week. Is it worth keeping? Yeah, the DX11 it's a 4-operator FM synth, unlike the DX7 and the bigger ones. So those are 6-operator. So the DX11 is going to sound thinner. But it still can make some of those DX era sounds. And excuse me, if you do some looking online, you can find some patches for it. And again, especially if you process it through some current stuff, it's got some cool sounds in it. My gorgeous wife is watching. Hey, beautiful. I heard that my wife is making an awesome dinner, so I'm not going to talk too much longer. What else? Let's see. Tim Johns, do you track in your studio or in other studios when doing a project, like for MWS or others? I do everything in my studio except for ensemble stuff, or drums, obviously. Typically I'll use Scott Williamson for that stuff. So what I do is I'll do my pre-production work here, and then I'll take just a 2-mix, a reference mix to his place, track drums there, and then I bring those files back here to mix. Same thing with, you know, if we're doing live strings or something. Obviously, like for that, we'll go up to Ocean Way in Nashville on a big project, like for Paul Cardall's records or Smitty or any of that. But yeah, just about anything else I can do here. Vocals we do here. Any instrument overdubs, you know, small string stuff we do here. Guitars. It's just a matter of space. So yeah. Bonnie, have you ever done something along the lines of Celtic music? Yes, I love Celtic music. In fact, on Ad Alta, one of the last pieces on the record is called, oh my gosh, what is it called? Dance of the Redeemed, I believe it's called. That is full on Celtic, and it's very film score oriented, but it has that thing. I also did a hymns album back in 2004 with a good friend of mine, Skip Clevenger, and that was all Celtic. Skip plays all kinds of Celtic stuff, pipes and whistles and you know, bagpipes and all that kind of stuff. That was a really cool project. So let's see, what else? A couple of things. You have a lot of synths, but your favorite electric pianos. You know, Calvin, it's funny. I'm not a big electric piano guy. I just, for whatever reason, I just never use them much. If I did, it would probably be Keyscape, because I don't think there's anything else out there that's that detailed. They're gorgeous, but just for whatever reason, yeah, I've never been a big electric piano guy. Okay, let's see. Wrapping up the questions, I think. Okay, good enough. Okay, let's switch gears. So, talk about projects. This is kind of what I've been waiting for. So a lot of you guys know some of my story. You know that you know about Ad Alta. That was a record that I dreamed of doing my entire life. I grew up on John Williams and Star Wars. I mean, all this film stuff. And so, you know, for ages I dreamed of doing that kind of thing. And I remember many years when we'd finish touring for the year in December, I would get home in January and I would say, okay, this is it. This is the year I'm going to do it. And for whatever reason, it never happened. And, you know, not to over spiritualize or anything, but I think God was saying, just wait, it's not time yet. And looking back, I have no doubt that that's the case, because I needed to wait until I had a story to tell. Because when I look back, I just wasn't writing material that was good enough. And until you really go through something in life that's difficult, you know, some of the best art comes from pain, comes from painful circumstances. And I'm not going to go into detail, but a lot of you guys know my story. And so I went through several years of excruciating circumstances. And in fact, all of my creative stuff just dried up. I stopped writing for a long time, and everything got put on the shelf. And so, long story short, it was 2014. I started. You know, I got in a much healthier place and met Anita, and our relationship started and blossomed, and that. It's amazing how that fueled so many good things in my life. And so I found myself writing again. And fast forward about a year from there to 2015, I think it was, I just started feeling like, you know what, it's when all the Kickstarter and all that kind of stuff started taking off. And so I just felt like that was the time. But the big test was going to be, could I raise the money to do it? Because it's extremely expensive to do that kind of record. You know, I essentially wanted to do a big film score album, which meant hiring an orchestra and rhythm section players and all that kind of stuff. But there's no way I could do that on my own. And so we did it. Long story short, it took 2 years of hard work. And a lot of that material I had sitting around. I mean, some of it was just little scraps of things I had written over the years, but I also wrote a lot of new material for it. But it was extremely intensive, and that album came out in 2017. And ever since, you know, people are always asking, are you going to do another one? And of course, the answer is yes, but there's a big asterisk there. I think about how much work that was, and which I'm not averse to work. That's just part of it. But to do that again, I feel like I have to wait until the pieces fall into place, and I just don't feel like it's not on the front burner quite yet. So I've been asking myself for the last couple years, last year in earnest, what am I supposed to do next? I mean, other than my work with Smitty, which is not going anywhere, I don't think. I mean, hopefully we get back out on the road sooner than later and start doing concerts again. But that's only 90 days a year. And of course, somebody asked in one of the last streams I did, about, don't you ever want to do, I forget how they asked it, don't you ever want to do, your own stuff, or do you ever feel like you're in the shadows, or something along those lines? And, the answer to that is no, because I feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. I feel like it's my job to help Michael do what he does, and obviously he touches the world through what he does, and it's an honor to be a part of that. On the other hand, yes, absolutely, I've got artistic aspirations of my own, obviously, and I've been feeling that urge for a long time, but I'm also a classic overthinker, and so I've found myself spinning my wheels for the last year or so, just like, what, man, am I supposed to do some kind of like modern worship album? What would that look like? And I do think that's in my future at some point, but there's a lot to wrap my head around with that, because man, there's a lot of things that have to fall into place to do something like that. To do that, it would have to be something that the listener could participate in, and that we could take on the road and do a live thing with that. But it would also have to be musically interesting to me, and I honestly haven't wrapped my head around yet how I would do that. So that's another project, is this worship thing, and it would be, you guys know this about me. I love epic stuff, big, cinematic. So put that in your placeholder, that pile. That's going to happen at some point. I feel like I'm supposed to do just a simple piano hymns album sooner than later. And that would actually be super easy to do, relatively speaking. I could crank that out pretty fast. I actually did. I recorded 9 hymns back in 2009, and I just put them out for free. And some of those went kind of around the world, and people really, I got a lot of feedback from that. So I'll do that at some point. Then, let's see. So there's Ad Alta 2, whatever we call it when it happens. There's the big epic worship thing, which is ultimately, I think, where I'm going to land long term. There's this little piano hymns thing, which is going to happen. But, as I do all this overthinking, I saw a Bob Goff quote the other day. Those of you guys who know Bob, you know who I'm talking about. Bob really just, honestly, I was praying about this. I'm like, God, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. And I saw this Bob Goff quote, and it says, I wrote it down. Figure out what fuels your joy and do lots of that. And that kind of answered the question for me. Other than Ad Alta, which was a huge dream come true for me, the other big thing that's always been on my radar is that this stuff I grew up on. I love 80s music. And, I won't talk in depth about why. In short, it's because that was a time of optimism, and everything was just fun, and it was innocent, and of course, melody. I'm a big melody guy. The songs were just fun to listen to. In fact, shoot, I wish I had my list handy, my working list. I won't name them all, but all this to say, I've been thinking, what if I did a big, epic, cinematic record of iconic 80s songs in a way that's very uniquely me, almost as if you mixed Ad Alta and songs by artists like Phil Collins, Genesis, Peter Gabriel, Mr. Mister, Tears for Fears. Those are just off the top of my head. And then I started working on a song list. And then I started actually putting some ideas down. So all this to say, that's going to be my next project. I don't know what it's going to be called yet, but it's, I just think there's no, it's the right time. It's the right time. These songs, you know, one of my overthinking things is well, you know, shouldn't I do a worship project? And I just thought, you know, there's more to life than just you know, one narrow kind of music. And so I just feel like when I saw that Bob Goff quote, that was the answer. You know, who's to say that that somebody who's a believer like me can't do fun, epic pop music? And that's what fuels me. I love that stuff. I think I could do a great job at it. And I think I could put a really unique twist on it that you haven't heard anywhere else. So imagine you know, some of the stuff, if you're familiar with Ad Alta, some of the, you know, the real moody, epic stuff, you know, like a Hans Zimmer score meets a Tears for Fears song. So that's kind of, you know, in a nutshell, that's what's coming. And I just feel like there's room for it. As I look around my room, I've got this keyboard collection that, you know, so much of which is from that era. And I thought, you know, it's a big thing right now. Everybody loves 80s. My daughter loves 80s stuff, which is awesome. I must be raising her right. And I just think, you know, before, you know, things are cyclical. You know, we had the 80s when they were current, and then the 90s, you know, where things kind of all went a whole different direction, which means that's going to come back too. And so before that happens, while people still love this big, epic, iconic stuff, and synth stuff is still big, I just think now's the time. So I'm off and running, and I'm going to leave you with a little snippet of a sketch that I started the other day. Now, I'll issue the disclaimer again. It's just ideas, but it's enough to give you an idea of where my head's at with this stuff. And I'm not even sure about what I'm about to play you. I don't know. The very first part of it, it could work, might not work. It starts off with piano and orchestra. And again, it's just a sketch, so you know, if I did it, you would hear a real orchestra. So who knows? Maybe it worked, maybe it won't. But those of you who are 80s fans, you'll know eventually when you hear this, you're going to know where I'm going with it. And it's enough of a taste to get what's going to happen. So I'm just going to shut up and play this for you and see what you think. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but here you go. Okay, there you go. So that's just a little taste. Obviously, that was Shout by Tears for Fears. And one of my favorite songs of the 80s. And so just picture that with a big live orchestra. I will intend to there's going to be a lot of orchestra on it. So there's also going to be vocals. I'll probably sing a lot of it, which is outside my comfort zone, but I think I can do it. And I'm probably going to bring in some guest vocals as well. I'm not about it all being me. But I just want to pay tribute to these songs. These songs that I grew up on, they're still great songs. The ones that I've picked are very, very timely. They still work today. And it's just going to be my way of tipping my hat to the legacy that I grew up on. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to get the attention of a few of these artists. In fact, I'll just say, if anybody wants to hook me up with Phil Collins, I will gladly welcome him onto this project. I've been reading a lot about Phil. I've always had a thing for him and Genesis in particular. Those guys are trailblazers to me, and that's one of my biggest influences. Just Tony Banks and Phil too. The chord changes and stuff that they tend to use. So you're going to hear a lot of that. So that's my announcement. That's kind of where I'm going, and I'm super excited about it. I just think that it's got a ton of potential, and bottom line is it's just plain fun. It lights me up. It's a blast to work on. I think there's some really cool creative approaches to take on this stuff that are going to surprise a lot of people. And at the end of the day, they're just great songs. They are great, great songs that have stood the test of time. And so anyway, I think that's enough for tonight. So I hope you guys are doing well. And again, staying safe, all that kind of stuff. So with that, I wish you well till the next time. I'm not sure when we'll do another one. Probably it won't be too long, probably another week or so. Anyway, that's it. Yeah, I hope you had fun. I hope this is entertaining and somewhat useful, especially to the studio guys. So that's it. Okay. Have a great week. Talk to you later.